It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. An apology from the BBC chair for the mistakes that cost two senior executives their job as a legal showdown approaches with the White House. A $1 billion lawsuit in prospect after Donald Trump's lawyers write to the BBC asking for a retraction, an apology and compensation. It follows an admission from the broadcaster that it misleadingly edited a documentary about the president. Coming up, I'll be getting all the political reaction to the BBC crisis and hear from veteran broadcaster Jonathan Dimbleby, who tells me that Mr. Trump's attack on the BBC is outrageous. Also tonight, I speak to former England player and football pundit Eni Aluko about Joey Barton's conviction for offensive social media posts about her and others, and the impact it's had on her career and personal life. Plus, a special investigation into the rise of Christian nationalism in the UK and the debate that it sparked among church leaders. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. Hello there, a very good evening. The chair of the BBC has apologised for editorial failings that led to the resignations yesterday of the Director General and the Head of News. Dimbleby and Deborah Turness both quit after a row over impartiality that centred around the editing of an edition of Panorama about Donald Trump and the January the 6th insurrection. A section was removed where he said he wanted supporters to demonstrate peacefully. Well, the BBC now faces the threat of legal action by the president, with Mr. Trump's lawyers asking for a full retraction and apology, plus compensation, or he'll sue for $1 billion in damages. Here's our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer.
Resignations, rumours of a coup, and now a looming legal threat. If things weren't bad enough at New Broadcasting House following the resignation of Director General Dimbleby and his news CEO Deborah Turness,
we're going to walk down and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down.
Cue confirmation that US President Donald Trump is so enraged by how his speech was doctored in this episode of Panorama, he's now threatening to sue. This, a copy of the letter sent on his behalf, the last line of which saying, if the BBC doesn't retract the programme and apologise by November the 14th at 5 p.m, President Trump will be left with no alternative but to enforce his legal and equitable rights by filing legal action for no less than $1 billion in damages. The BBC, it says, is on notice. Today, a written apology to MPs from the chair, Samir Shah, one of the last men standing, as he spoke to his own news channel about what went wrong.
The apologising is for the way the team edited President Trump's speech to his supporters on January the 6th.
The chain of events which has upended things within the BBC was triggered by a memo from Michael Prescott, a former external advisor to the BBC's Editorial Standards Committee, raising concerns about institutional bias over Gaza, gender identity and immigration issues.
All these stories and issues that Mr. Prescott raises have been considered at the committee. In fact, indeed, that's how he knows about them, because he's a member of the advisory. So I don't think it's fair to characterise it as some kind of uncovery. Secondly, there's also an impression given that we've listened to these concerns and we've done nothing. And that is also not an accurate representation of both what Mr. Prescott says and what the BBC has done.
We heard nothing from the Director General and his news CEO in the days after the memo went to press. And while there was no sign of Davey in his office, Turness entered by the front door saying this.
I would like to say it has been the privilege of my career to serve as the CEO of BBC News and to work with our brilliant team of journalists. I stepped down over the weekend because the buck stops with me. But I'd like to make one thing very clear. BBC News is not institutionally biased. That's why it's the world's most trusted news provider.
So what exactly has been going on inside of New Broadcasting House? Sky News understands that Deborah Turness had wanted to get a statement out early last week, but was blocked by the BBC board, which was arguing over the wording. Now, some of the BBC's own journalists have gone on the record to say what we're actually seeing play out now goes back much further than the last week, with claims that within the BBC there are those who have systematically set out to undermine Tim Davie and his senior leadership for a long time now, a coup being the implication from within the BBC board. Former senior insiders say the corporation's problems extend beyond the boardroom.
I think we're now seeing that there was, of course, the leaks to the Telegraph, and some of the campaigning inside the BBC probably does have a degree of political motivation. But then equally, we know this year that Lisa Nandy, the Labour Culture Secretary, seemed at one point to be trying to get Tim Davie fired. And the fact is the BBC always has these political cross currents, and it's got to withstand them.
A national broadcaster without a leader and facing $1 billion threat. Sounding like a plot from one of its dramas, a very real problem the BBC now faces. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Well, let's go to Washington, bring in our US correspondent James Matthews. So, James, how likely is it that the President of the United States could sue the BBC?
Well, there's every chance. I suppose we'll find out at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday. That's the deadline given to the BBC for these Trump demands. Not for the first time, Jonathan. You know, the president can smell the money in all of this. Remember, he is a president who's not been slow to pursue media companies with legal threats, and it has worked for him in the past. He got $16 million from CBS, $15 million from ABC, from both their parent companies. I suppose that might be a guide to the kind of compensation amount that he is talking about. His argument is that the BBC trashed his reputation in all of this. His lawyers are saying this Panorama programme and the dodgy edit was designed to deliberately denigrate him, showed what they say is a reckless disregard for the truth. And they say that millions saw it worldwide, causing the president overwhelming financial and reputational harm. They have laid out their demands in a letter to the BBC chair. They want this full and fair retraction of the documentary, an apology, which they already have, of course, and thereafter a sum of compensation for harm caused. If they don't get it by that deadline, 5 p.m. on Friday, they're saying they're going to sue for $1 billion. And of course, as Katie said in her report, that letter ends rather darkly. The BBC is on notice. It is the action, Jonathan, of a president who leans on the media like none has before. Routinely, Donald Trump rails against outlets for negative coverage, and he covets those organisations that are sympathetic to him. And I suppose that's the bigger picture in all of this Trump narrative, his narrative that critical coverage amounts to fake news. A mistake on this scale and with this profile, it does rather threaten to undermine scrutiny by all media of the White House at a time when that scrutiny has never been more important.
OK, James in Washington, thank you. Well, there's been lots of political reaction here in the UK. Let's speak to our chief political correspondent, John Craig. John, it seems that pretty much everyone in Westminster has a position on this. And
they'll get a chance to voice those tomorrow, because we are expecting a common statement from Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary. Her team have been saying that she plans to update Parliament. Well, that sounds to me like a common statement. And, well, we'll hear from the defenders of the BBC and indeed its critics and some would say enemies. The biggest defender of the BBC today, the most outspoken, has been Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader. Now, he has actually written to other party leaders and calling for their support in backing him and criticising Donald Trump. In his letter, Mr. David Sir Ed talks about Trump's assault on the BBC is a serious threat to our national interest, and so on. Now, it's not likely that he will get that support he's talking about. He talks about the BBC being one of our most important, an important national institution and so on, something Lisa Nandy also said. The strongest criticism, as you might expect, has come from Nigel Farage. He has said today I'm going to defund the BBC from its current model. Now, the licence fee is subject to an awful lot of debate today. Can that survive the charter review, the charter renewal in a couple of years' time? Nigel Farage has said the BBC's been institutionally biased for decades, and he talks about issues like Europe, migration, net zero, the climate, and Gaza. He said that coverage of President Trump has been biased. And he said when he was hosting an event earlier today, I spoke to the president on Friday. He just said to me, is this how you treat your best ally? Quite a powerful comment, isn't it? And when he was asked a question by our own Mari Aurora, he said this, what the BBC did was election interference. And he said, when I had a chat with him on Friday, he made his feelings on the subject known to me in no uncertain terms, not in a quotable form. Now, on the subject of the licence fee, Kemi Badenoch has tonight honed in on that. She says we need, in terms of the threat of legal action, we need to remember the licence fee is paid for by licence fee payers. If the BBC is sued by President Trump or anyone else, it's licence fee payers who actually pay that cost. So we need to look after them, she said. She said the BBC did something wrong. They need to look at how that happened, explain themselves, not treat the people pointing out what's wrong with contempt and sneering at them. We'll hear a lot more about that tomorrow. We've not heard a great deal from the government today. A few Labour-backed benchers have backed the BBC, but it's very much shaped up into, not for the first time, a bit of a spat between Sir Ed Davey and Nigel Farage.
OK, John, thank you. Well, a little earlier, I spoke to the veteran broadcaster, Jonathan Dimbleby, who started his career at the BBC nearly 60 years ago and worked in numerous high-profile presenter roles for the organisation. I began by asking him how the BBC should react to the Donald Trump threats against the broadcaster.
Well, I don't think that the BBC should immediately give him any more than they've already indicated, which is an apology. And Samir Shah, the chair, has already said he apologises for the error, the joining together of two separate parts in the interview to make them look at one, and that was a mistake. If he wants that apology repeated in spades, I expect it can be said a number of times. But, you know, Donald Trump's got... It's always interesting to me that Donald Trump, whose proximity to the truth is, to put it mildly, often challenged, should regard the BBC, and I think he used the word corrupt and dishonest. That's what he said, I think, and that is really, it seems to me, to be outrageous.
And I suppose the other issue is, do you think Donald Trump actually has a strong case?
I don't think he has a strong case. I think he has a weak case. I think that that it was an error, an editorial error. You know, in written journalism, you take a bit of a quote and you put ... and then you put the rest of the quote. They should have put in a visual equivalent of that, whether that is fading to black, going to white, or making a link. I think it was done to stimulate interest in the programme, which a lot of people watched, and there were virtually, as far as I know at the time, no complaints at all about the balance of the programme. So I think it was a serious error. It should have been picked up, and it should have been, once it was identified, corrected and apologised earlier than it was. But the BBC in these matters, because they want to be so thorough, tends to go more slowly than would be desirable in terms of relations with the public.
Do you think, then, these two high-profile resignations are bowing to pressure put on them by the American administration?
No, I don't actually think that. I think that, I should say that I know Tim Davey pretty well, and I have a very high regard for him. And when I heard the news, I was shocked and dismayed, because I think he's by far the best person in a very difficult position to guide and take the BBC through to the very rough waters of what is going to be the charter renewal process. It is exceptionally important for public broadcasting. I think that he represents the best in the BBC, which is impartiality. And, you know, there are people on the populist right of the spectrum, which is growing in size, who, in my view, interpret impartiality as expressing the views that they have as powerfully as possible. There is no concept of impartiality in some of what they say that I can recognise. And I've, you know, worked in the BBC for a very long time, and I know it is committed to that. And it does make errors in the huge number of programmes that it puts out in news,
current affairs, documentaries. It makes errors. All broadcasters do.
Do you think that there might not be institutional bias then? It's clear that you don't think that that exists, as Deborah Turness said today. But do you think the BBC is perhaps guilty of groupthink, maybe even subconsciously, with a left-leaning, liberal, metropolitan viewpoint that sort of seeps in, maybe unintentionally?
I don't take that view. If you listen to the BBC, which I do a lot, it is not metropolitan. It's an out-of-date assumption that it's metropolitan. It's got bases everywhere across the country. In Salford, which is hardly metropolitan London, it has people who know that territory, who know their audiences. So I don't think it is institutionally biased. And I think that was one of the reasons, I suspect, why there was such a long time, very unfortunately, before the letter finally went to the committee from Samir Shah, to the Culture Committee. So I don't think that.
Do you think that the word coup is wrong then? David Yelland, who used to edit The Sun, said on the BBC this morning he felt that there was some sort of coup from the BBC board, that the Observer newspaper as well, saying that political interference has led to these resignations. Would you go that far? People who want to see the end of the BBC have been working in some sort of Machiavellian way to cause this upset?
I'm cautious about the word coup. I mean, I've reported from places where there were coups, and I know what that means as military action using guns, seizing buildings. I think that everyone cites the name of Robbie Gibb for being a very powerful figure. But I think that I don't want to identify individuals. I think that there is a definite urge, and don't forget the non-executive members of the board appointed from outside. Some of them were appointed under previous administrations, and in the case of we know that one of the former leaders of the Conservative Party has been denouncing the BBC all over the place. And he actually put Robbie Gibb into post. But that said, I don't doubt that Robbie Gibb believes what he says. I don't think he's just trying to destroy the BBC. I don't think that. I do think that people like him like the idea of the BBC being weakened. That's the problem. They want to see the BBC weakened, not strengthened. They probably have strong views about how the licence fee, or whether there should be a licence fee. They probably have very strong views about how the charter should change the constitutional role of the BBC. I don't know that, but I'm suspicious. But a coup is not a word I'd use.
No, we should probably explain Robbie Gibb is a non-executive director on the board of the BBC. He used to be Theresa May's Director of Communications. No, that's absolutely fine. So how does the BBC move on from all of this then, putting the Donald Trump possibly suing to one side? It has to own up to its mistakes sooner, would you say, and also perhaps has to instill in the workforce the importance of impartiality? I think that has to be hammered again and again and again, particularly as we now live in such a fractured, divided society where people's views are picked up from all sources, social media and elsewhere, and sometimes aren't thought through very carefully. It's a rather toxic environment, a polarised environment, makes impartiality even more important. As to the future for the BBC, I've always thought, actually, that the BBC, in what it says publicly, because of its wanting to do due diligence to everyone involved, don't forget it has to apologise publicly far more than any other organisation that I know of, a public organisation. It should move more swiftly towards making apologies when they're wrong, more on the front foot, and more on the front foot when they are absolutely convinced that they're being unfairly treated. The big problem is going to be what happens in the next several months. How many months before someone can be found of anything like the calibre of Tim Davie, for instance, to lead the BBC in these extremely troubled times? So yes, it is very serious for the BBC, and I just hope that a bit of balance will be restored, rather more impartiality in the judgment that is taken about how the BBC is doing, how it's performing, and what it has to do. Jonathan Dimbleby speaking to me a little bit earlier. Still to come on the UK Tonight, pundit Eni Aluko tells this programme that she didn't leave her house for a week after being targeted by ex-footballer Joey Barton online.
She was beautiful, she was bright, she had so much potential.
This wasn't an accident. Those individuals that didn't do their job properly, as far as I'm concerned, Nick, they need to be in a dock.
I don't know why a local authority would be trying so hard to avoid scrutiny.
Is cover-up too strong?
I don't think it is. The evidence is there. Nanita should never have died.
Just got so many questions, and I'm not the only one.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. Now, last week, broadcasters Eni Aluko, Lucy Ward and Jeremy Vine won a legal victory when the former footballer Joey Barton was found guilty of 6 counts of sending grossly offensive social media posts. During the trial, Barton argued he was the victim of a political prosecution and that his comments aimed at Eni Aluko and Lucy Ward were simply dark and stupid humour. But jurors at Liverpool Crown Court found his comments had crossed the line between free speech and a crime. I sat down with Eni a little earlier, who told me that she didn't leave her house for a week after Barton posted about her. I asked her what her initial reaction was to seeing those messages.
I was really shocked. Joey Barton is someone who I've only ever had, prior to January 2024, had positive interactions with, that he initiated. You know, he was very positive about my career, very positive about big moments in my career, moving to Juventus, you know, playing for England. So 4 years later to have, you know, this just kind of onslaught of posts comparing me to serial killers and murderers, Fred and Rose West and Stalin and Pol Pot, and just the most extreme things, putting my head on their bodies. And I was stunned and devastated, really, just didn't understand. And I think the problem is always the amplification of that. You know, that starts with one person, and it becomes millions of people then thinking it's okay to say similar things. You know, throughout the last 2 years, you know, we've had to get in touch with much smaller accounts. And when I say we, my lawyers, you know, there's one lad that posted that I should be shot. You know, this is where it starts to get really dangerous because people think they can just say what they want because a bigger account has emboldened them to do so.
So what effect did that have on you personally and professionally when you're reading messages like that? How did it manifest itself in terms of day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, I was devastated. It came out of the blue, as I said, and I was just doing my job. It didn't really make sense. That first week, it kind of debilitated. I was very sort of crippled. You know, didn't really feel like I could do anything. You know, after I reported it to the police, I then left the country because I just couldn't really cope being in this sort of fishbowl type, you know, experience where you feel like everybody's talking about you. You start getting very paranoid about, you know, that leading into physical violence or somebody, you know, accosting you on the street and knowing what's been said. This is the thing with online abuse. There's an invisibility to it that feels very uncomfortable. You know, if you say something to me on the street, I know who I'm dealing with. With online abuse, it's this kind of wave that you don't know where you're, you know, where the people who are saying these horrific things about you are. They could be next door, they could be down the road. And that is a really, really horrible feeling. I think people sometimes like to minimise the impact of words, but it's bullying. You know, it's the same feeling. You know, if anyone's getting bullied in school or at the workplace, it has a really damaging impact, and it's no different when it's online.
Especially, and I'm quoting now, when you hear you're only there to tick boxes. You know, when you've worked so hard, playing for England, getting to the top in the world of punditry, and then to be told that.
Well, that's just racism, isn't it? It's just pure racism. Because, you know, I think when you get reduced to just the colour of your skin, despite all the things I've done, despite the hard work that I've put in, to some extent, you know, I've had to go through some really difficult things to get to where I'm at. So, you know, that's just, you know, in my view, pure racism. And I'm delighted that the jury have said that crosses the line. Because to my earlier point, I've seen that over and over again. You're just a tick box, you're a DEI hire, and it's just been amplified over and over again to the point it's been normalised as a slur. So I'm glad that that's now been criminally said. That's, you know, that's too much.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because it's an interesting point, isn't it? We know that free speech is under attack in this country, but as you say, the prosecution made it very clear that there is a line.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that line needs to be clear. That line's been blurred because social media platforms, unfortunately, like X, aren't going to do anything about this kind of speech, this kind of conduct. And so people generally live in this vacuum where they think they can say whatever they like. So I'm a big fan of clear lines. I'm a big fan of, you know, knowing exactly where, you know, how much you can say. Because we all have to regulate our speech in a civilised society. You cannot just say what you want. And I don't think we've ever been able to. There's defamation laws, there's harassment laws, there's criminal laws that say you cannot just say what you want about somebody else and harass them. So I hope that this case is a big objective of mine, is to show there's consequences to this conduct. And I hope that this case shows that actually what the line is. So people self-regulate, to be honest. And realise that freedom of speech, absolutely fine, I believe in it myself, but there is always a line and it does come with consequences if you cross that line.
And you gave evidence. How hard was that?
It was intense. It was really, it's a kind of an out-of-body experience, you know, that I don't particularly want to do again. Obviously, you've got a jury there, you've got the judge there, you've got Barton there, but you know, in some way, I felt quite empowered. I think there's something to be said for standing up to bullies, you know, and whether it's, you know, a young kid that's getting bullied at school, or a woman on broadcasting, or Jeremy Vine, who's, you know, leading broadcaster in this country, it has the same impact, bullying, but you got to stand up to it.
How do you feel about the bully now?
We've defeated him. You know, there's, you know, I'm sure he regrets what he's done, and And that's all you can ask for. You ask for consequence, deterrence, and, you know, some deep thinking, I think, from Joey Barton as to his conduct moving forward.
How did you feel when the verdict came?
Relief.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a big fan of the justice system in the UK. I think it's one of the things that makes the UK such a robust and strong country, but I'd like for it to be a bit quicker. It takes a while, you know, it's been coming up to 2 years, but I'm very, very grateful to the police, to obviously the jury that sort of made a decision that was fair and just in my view. And, you know, hopefully moving forward, I'll be able to, you know, not have to deal with this kind of conduct again. Yeah,
I mean, moving forward, how are you going to do that? What are your next steps now this is behind you?
Well, I think it's really important for me to always prioritise being in spaces that I feel protected and I feel respected. Obviously, as visible broadcasters, as a public figure, you are going to get people who just don't think you're very good and you know, have an opinion on you. That's absolutely fine. That's always been the case. But I think more generally, you know, I want to be in environments where I thrive. I want to be in an environment where there's a culture where, you know, for me as a black woman, I feel protected. So I think that's really important moving forward. And you know, I'm always open to working with, whether it's Ofcom or government, you know, kick it out. I speak to those guys a lot who deal with a lot of the sort of increasing racism and sexism in football. You know, I'm passionate about that work and I'm committed to that work so that not just me, other people also benefit from making sure that this culture doesn't, this sort of awful culture doesn't impact them.
Other thoughts there of Eni Aluko following that court case. Plenty more still to come on the UK tonight, including a Sky News investigation into how the far-right movement in the UK is using Christian symbols and the fear it's raising among church leaders. Hello again. Christian nationalism is riding high in the UK off the back of a Unite the Kingdom rally in September led by Tommy Robinson. Religious iconography was dotted throughout the demonstration, including crucifixes in the crowd and the Lord's Prayer recited on stage. To find out more, data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire joined the so-called far-right bishop Kieran Dewar on a mass baptism.
One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all. The Lord be with you.
Bishop Kieran Dewar rejects the Church of England as heretics. Instead, he gathers his flock on a beach in Cornwall.
Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
They answered the call he made on social media. He is preparing for a mass baptism.
In the Lord Jesus Christ, I gladly baptize you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Yes!
Yes!
Critics called Dewar the far-right bishop, a label he rejects. But he represents a new type of Christianity, more militant, more political, one I've come here to understand. Several of those here came because they saw Dewar speaking at Tommy Robinson's Unite the Kingdom rally. And they are ready to follow him into the cold waters of the Celtic Sea.
God bless you, Fergus, man.
I saw Kieran's speech at Unite the Kingdom rally, and it was just epic. I mean, I just loved it.
The other thing that Kieran does, he preaches around the political side a bit more, especially when it comes to, immigration and Islam. Is that a message that chimes as well with you?
I'd say so, yeah. I would say there's we are a Christian culture, we're a Christian nation. And I do feel like we have lost a lot of that.
God, you have not abandoned Britain. And though our night has been long, yet your dawn breaks.
In September, Dewar had addressed the 150,000-strong crowd at the Tommy Robinson Unite the Kingdom march in central London. It was not his first appearance with the far-right activist.
This nation of ours is under attack.
In July last year, he also shared his stage.
We are not at war with just the Muslim.
This is something new, and it is growing. A movement that has long marched against immigration, against Islam, is now marching behind the cross.
When we arrived, that lady said, "Oh, it's the far-right bishop."
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Oh, I laugh now. I am none of the things that they call me, but it's now become a moniker that is, something I laugh at.
What for you, as a Christian, is the appeal of Tommy Robinson?
It's not the appeal of Tommy Robinson per se. It was the opportunity that he afforded to me to stand in front of that many people and to both pray for the people and this nation.
But you're marching front and centre with Tommy Robinson. It's fair enough if that nuance gets lost. You can say, I like the platform, but you are, in effect, in message, endorsing him and his politics.
I don't think that at all. I'm very clear on what I endorse. My political views are public and well-founded. My stand with Tommy is not necessarily political. It's a man that has surrendered his life to Christ and is on that journey of faith and trying as a good shepherd to help lead him in that and to shape that faith in a way that is beneficial to him.
One of the other things you said is, we're at war with the Muslim. That's quite...
Well, I didn't say that. I said we're
not just
at war.
Implying we are at war with the Muslim.
And as I said, unfortunately, what I was trying to convey, having listened to an entire day's worth of speeches, didn't come across quite the way I'd hoped to have expressed it. The problem for me is, I understand we're a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-faith Britain. But when you have so many elements that refuse to get into the great melding pot of multiculturalism, but remain outside and try and force that culture, force that religious system, force that legal system into an existing culture, then there's always going to be problems. I would love to see more Christianity at the heart of our politics. I would love to see more Christian principles once again driving our legal system.
For the people here, it is about a personal, private faith, but it's also connected to the politics. And that Christian identity elevates it from ground level protest to something a bit bigger, a bit grander. And especially when you put that in opposition to Islam, as many people do online, it becomes bigger still. It goes from a culture war to a clash of civilizations.
Or even further than that. Anti-immigrant and anti-Islam campaigners promote the idea of a holy war.
Certainly, the time of the Crusades will need to come again if we are to return.
What do you mean by that?
We are overrun in every way.
And that online culture filters back to the ground. New groups like this one on Instagram use crusader imagery to start the final war on Islam, attracting more than 50,000 followers. Maria Power, who researches the far right's use of religion, says it is Christian nationalism. Not just a flag to rally behind, but a cross too.
People there would say, this is a Christian country, we should be able to show our flag, march with the cross, say prayers at these things, and that's not necessarily intimidating or racist, it's just we are saying this is our identity, we're proud of it.
Yeah, but I think if you're using your identity to threaten, and you're shouting and proclaiming your identity in a way that makes people that don't, as you see it, belong, it is threatening. I think that a lot of it is the result of the kind of growth and spread of social media.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is actually coming over to us from the States. So you start to see inklings of it probably about 4 or 5 years ago. Particular pastors talking this way, podcasts emerging, and content emerging on places like YouTube. And it's very easy to fall down the rabbit hole of the algorithm, isn't it?
Listen, you have received Jesus Christ now, okay? Jesus Christ and demons cannot dwell together. So them demons are already gone.
This was another baptism organised online and held in a canal in Hertfordshire. The man behind it is Ricky Doolan.
This is the place where we do some of our things.
We met at his office in Lincoln, where he live streams religious services as part of another independent church. He is a longtime friend and follower of Tommy Robinson, and more recently, his spiritual advisor.
I don't know him, he doesn't strike me as a spiritual or Christian person, so that's a recent thing.
Well, it's a recent thing. I went to visit him in prison 3 weeks before he left, and he received Jesus Christ as his personal Lord and Saviour in that visit. So it's a new journey from that position.
And so you effectively converted him to Christianity? Is that a fair way of
if you want to call it conversion, yeah.
In terms of that discourse shifting, I think we saw that at Unite the Kingdom in some ways. There was one politician, Belgian politician, he said, it has to be clear that Islam is our real enemy. We have to get rid of Islam. Islam does not belong in Europe and Islam does not belong in the UK. That got a big cheer.
Did it get a big cheer? I think what's happened is people are so fatigued with the fruits of people that say they follow Islam that they are tired with it. The general
Do you agree with that statement?
I don't agree with the statement in terms because it's just not something that is realistic, and I don't think it's some. But we have to look at, right, if we can't fix the problem, then that statement would make more sense. But I would like to try and fix the problem first.
So if we can't fix the problem, you're saying maybe Islam doesn't have a place in Europe, it doesn't have a place in the UK?
Well, if innocent people are being killed because of a religion, then it's something we have to look at seriously.
St Martin's in the Fields, a Church of England church at the top of Trafalgar Square. Its vicar is Sam Wells, who signed an open letter accusing the far right of corrupting the Christian faith. St Martin's is a royal parish church. This then is the establishment that Tommy Robinson and others rail against. But the majority of Christians in Britain still belong to churches like this, whose leaders have publicly condemned the Christian imagery used at his mass rally.
This church was right, up against the march. The people who come here regularly, did they have questions? Did they see that Christian symbology? What did they want to talk about afterwards?
I think they were hurt. The gestures of the cross, the Christian symbols are about love and understanding and peace and gentleness, and they're being thrust in people's faces as weapons. I think that's very painful.
Is there a point here that as the Church of England has changed, it's also slightly retreated, it's become a bit more warm and cuddly, progressive, liberal? We had ABBA songs earlier. As a result of that, it's failed to meet some of these political challenges. So now you have people
marching in the street behind the cross, but they're not necessarily filling the pews?
I think that's a false distinction with respect. There are plenty of people capable of, if you like, riding on the back of the raw emotion of people who feel they've been deprived of something, who feel entitled to something, and who look at certain others and say, you know, it's because of you that what I'm entitled to and my traditions have been inhibited. That's easily manipulated. It comes from a place of anger that I have some sympathy for. And the church, in a sense, can't get it right, because if it rides the back of that, it ends up being quite clumsy. If it doesn't ride the back of that, it's in danger of being called irrelevant. So, you know, you can't quite win, really.
If the talk is of winning, well, there are very different battlegrounds. The cloisters versus a Cornish beach. This was only the first of several mass baptisms Dewar has planned across the country.
You're ready for it, mate. Ready for it.
Come on, Mark.
This isn't just about the extreme right using Christianity for their own ends. It's just as much some Christians using the far right to reach new audiences.
And the Holy Spirit. Amen.
A new Christian politics, in all sorts of ways and all sorts of places, is on the march.
God bless you, man.
Really interesting. Well, Tom joins me now. Tom, in the US, we've seen political Christianity for many decades, haven't we? It was touched on in your piece. Is it moving here, do you think?
Yeah, I think it is, but in perhaps surprising ways. So there are US organisations that fund activities here in the UK, especially around issues like abortion in particular. But I think what we've seen is the sort of global network of influencers. So if we think about how the right, the far right used to organise, used to be very hierarchical, used to be cells. Now it's a lot more based on social media, and those two worlds interact a lot more. So it's really striking at the Unite the Kingdom rally, the Tommy Robinson rally. That was a few days after Charlie Kirk had been murdered. And, you know, Charlie Kirk is maybe not the most famous person in the UK, especially at that time, but he was a really big point there, and his Christianity was a really big point there. So I think it's something that's certainly growing, but I think it's more in that sort of loose network sort of way. Some of the people we spoke to there, Kieran Dewar, at the beginning of the piece in Cornwall, Ricky Doolan, you know, they would not describe themselves as Christian nationalists because they see that as an American term. They've been doing this in the UK for a while, but they have found a new audience, and I think that is part of that American influence. And it does feel a bit strange to the UK. There is perhaps a tradition of it more in Northern Ireland, other places, but in terms of mainland Britain, this feels like something new, that fusing of religion with politics, especially the sort of street politics that Tommy Robinson has, you know, mustered so effectively over the last few weeks.
Yeah, really fascinating. And Tommy Robinson and the bishop appearing on stage, it's quite fascinating, that dynamic.
Yeah, and, you know, that's something I put to Kieran Dewar. You know, you're on stage with him. You're not only on stage with him, you're marching through the streets, and he'd say, well, I don't agree with everything he says. And I think a lot of people will say, well, you can't really have your cake and eat it at that point. The nuances may be lost on there. You are effectively endorsing that message. But he would say, look, I've got this platform. It gives me opportunity. And I think that is an important part here. This isn't just about the political side, you know. Tommy Robinson and the people on stage, they want to win minds, but I genuinely believe that Dewar and the other Christians, they want to win souls at the same time. They see this as a great vehicle for that. So I think it can be both sincere, but also have this more worrying effect that when, you know, you're using these symbols of Christianity to identify with a certain group, and if you're not in that group, what does that mean? Especially if you want to put Christianity at the heart of political life, which is what these people do want to do. Speaking to, you know, others there, they'd say, yeah, we'd end gay marriage, we would restrict abortion rights if we had this sort of political Christianity. That's something we haven't seen in the UK, and it is something that does feel a lot more American.
Yeah, really interesting. OK, Tom, thank you very much. Lots more still to come on the UK tonight. The Germany head coach, Julian Nagelsmann, has leapt to the defence of underperforming Liverpool forward Florian Wirtz. Sport is next.
Eastern Libya is the new doorway to Europe for people being smuggled from Africa and Asia.
We are close to Greece. You can see it.
We've obtained unprecedented access to the authorities.
Do you feel you're just scratching the surface?
We've been on the raids, out with the Coast Guard,
Absolutely desperate.
and inside the detention centres.
How did you cope with that?
To find what's pushing people to Europe and what's driving the authorities here to stop them.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. No freedom! Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Hello again. Sky News understands the International Olympic Committee is moving towards a blanket ban on transgender women from women's sport. Here's our sports correspondent, Rob Harris.
This is another story that flows back to Donald Trump, because since he returned to the White House at the start of the year, he's been talking quite a bit about his concerns about safety and fairness in women's sports. If transgender women can compete, he introduced an executive order to ban trans women and had threatened to deny any visas to trans women trying to compete at the Olympics in 2028 in LA from coming to the country. Well, now, Sky News understands the International Olympic Committee is moving towards introducing a blanket ban on transgender women competing in women's sporting events. They'd previously left it to each individual sport to take the decision, but there's certainly been a shift with so many sports, including athletics and swimming, adopting blanket bans. World Athletics has also introduced swab testing to determine whether athletes do have the presence of the male Y chromosome. I understand last week at IOC meetings that IOC members were briefed on whether to introduce such sex testing in future. There is still also this issue with athletes with differences of sex development, and I understand that the IOC is also looking to emulate World Athletics and ban athletes with DSD from women's events. Now, it is a policy that could be seen as discriminatory, but to others, the physical advantages that you go through from male puberty do distort the sporting competition if you are competing against women. And now, while the IOC says no final decision has been taken, this is something that's going to advance to a potential decision at the start of 2026 from a full meeting of the IOC session. And it could now come into effect as a policy from 2028 in LA. For the IOC, this could be returned to the sex testing that they ended in the late 1990s.
Rob Harris there, more sport now with Will.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Sky Mobile sponsors the transfer window on Sky Sports News.
Right.
Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank was all smiles with his teammates today, but his future still seems somewhat uncertain.
Honest, I'm just sick and tired of this.
The number that was put before me was 50% more than our highest paid player at the time.
Jimmy had the feeling, do they really want me here?
My determination was not to sell Jimmy to that particular club.
It made me look bad in front of the fans. It was not necessary.
The biggest single challenge is how we managed his exit publicly, which probably Jimmy didn't like very much.
He's settling into his new surrounds. The player renamed Judas Floyd Money in the Bank when he was drummed out of Ellen Road.
Don't believe the figures at all. Don't believe the figures at all.
Reading the text last night, that was nothing about money from his agent. Well, Jesus, lads, honestly.
I just think he's greedy.
The perception that people have of me, the difficult person, blah, 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 never there. Sometimes things happen for a reason.
Another day, another summer signing. The delightfully named Gerald Floyd Hasselbank from Boa Vista. Jimmy to his pals.
Have you heard about people like Billy Bremner and Norman Hunter and things like that?
No.
You never heard of them?
No.
You'll find out about them.
Yeah, I will find out, but I never heard of them, no.
They tell me you put Jimmy. They call you Jimmy and that's it, is that right?
Yes, they call me Jimmy in Portugal and that's it. I think in the beginning of the season I'm gonna learn about English football. But I want to make the best of it and score so much goals as possible.
We finished second top goal scorer and...
Sky Business sponsors this report.
And let's finish the programme with a look at the weather. It's going to be changeable this week with further showers or longer spells of rain, and it will turn colder towards the weekend. Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland look fine this evening, bar the odd shower. England and Wales will see more widespread showers, heavy and thundery in places, and prolonged over parts of northeastern England, but much of the south looks dry. Showers will slowly fade tonight, leaving many places dry with fog developing, but Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales and western England will turn wet and windy later. Rain there will extend into central and southern Scotland tomorrow morning. And that's all from the UK tonight. Sarah Jane will be back tomorrow at 8. Up next, it's Yala Hakim with The World. From all of us here, thanks for watching.